everyone, my name is Jessie. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm doing my August wrap-up. In total, I read 9 books. For rating breakdowns, I read a total of 3 5-star books, 1 4.5-star book, 2 4-star books, 1 3.5-star book, 1 3-star book, and 1 2-star book. For genre breakdowns, I read a total of 2 romance books, 2 adult fantasy books, 1 young adult fantasy, 1 young adult sci-fi, 1 thriller, and 1 memoir, and 1 historical fiction. I'll start my wrap-ups by talking about the books I liked the least and working my way up to the books I liked the most. So we'll start with the 2-star book of the month, and that is Shatter Me by Tahira Mafi. I didn't like this one little bit. I think that the only thing that bumped it up from a 1-star book for me was the ending was better than the rest of the book. It wasn't good, but it was better than the rest of the book. I am going to do a full-on review for this book because I have a lot to say on it, but to kind of wrap up my thoughts in a quick summary, I hated the writing style, didn't connect to it at all. I thought it was very disjointed, it didn't flow, you're very confused the entire time, and it's superfluous for no reason. The second thing is the main character. I couldn't stand her. I've never read about a more passive protagonist. She didn't do anything this whole book, and she was just very aggravating to read about, and we're in her head the whole time, so there was no escape, and I just really didn't like her. Side characters, no development whatsoever. They're just there. They're just nothing. There's nothing to them. They're super forgettable. I have a lot more to say, but I'm going to save it for the full review. So I will not be continuing on with this series. So sorry for those of you who love this book. Great. I'm so glad you do. If you don't know what this is about, I'll wrap up the summary really quick. It's a dystopian. It's about this protagonist, this character who has a lethal touch. Anyone she touches dies, and she starts off in prison and is in prison for this mysterious crime that she committed, and we're trying to figure out what that crime is from her, and then she's whisked off to work for the corrupt government as their weapon. That's pretty much it. So, has a cool, intriguing premise, just didn't connect with me on any level whatsoever. Might be one of my least favorite books of the year so far, so I'm really upset because I had a lot of expectations, but yeah, didn't like it. Sorry guys. The next book I want to talk about is my 3-star book of the month, and that is When Breath Turns to Air. This is a memoir, or a nonfiction, I guess, about a neurosurgeon who is diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer in his mid-30s and decides to write this memoir as he's trying to fight the cancer and make a meaningful life in the face of death. So it sounded really powerful, and there were some nuggets in there that, you know, were definitely valuable, and I do recommend this book, but it did get a 3-star for me because it focused so much more on his life prior to the cancer. And while it was nice to know all of that, that was the majority of the book, and so for me, I didn't connect or relate to this character at all because he had such a different life than most people lead, being a neurosurgeon. Very intelligent man, very kind-hearted. He sounded like a wonderful human being, and I'm so glad I read his book. It just didn't connect with me as much as I wanted it to, but that doesn't mean it's bad by any means. I still really enjoyed it and did find value from reading it. So especially the epilogue, his wife actually writes the epilogue after his passing, and that made me pretty emotional. So I do still recommend this book. I think it is powerful, but just for me didn't connect as much as I would have liked. So moving on. At 3.5 3.5-star book of the month is The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware. I have a full review on this that I will link up above so that if you want to check it out, you can. I'm not going to talk too much about it. This basically follows a woman who takes this nannying job at this very wealthy family's home with these pretty crazy kids, and this house that she's nannying in is a smart house where everything is kind of like our Amazon Alexa or Google Home, but times 10. It's really cool and creepy, and it's also like a kind of got like a ghost story aspect to it. It's got so many elements that I absolutely loved in this book, and some of the build-up was incredible. Like the way that Ruth Ware really put us in the protagonist's shoes and just made us feel all of the tension and terror that the main character was feeling was incredible. Unfortunately, I did bump it down to 3.5 because I was so disappointed with the ending. The twists, in my opinion, did nothing for the story. Like if there were neither of the twists, then the story would have been the exact same. It didn't change much. It was very unnecessary to me, and it just fell flat. It wasn't exciting, and it didn't take advantage of some of these really cool aspects that were introduced in this book. So if you want to see my full review, it's got a spoiler and a non-spoiler section to it, so if you want to check that out, you can, link in the description. But yeah, 3.5 stars. I still recommend it because it's got really, really cool aspects to it, and I love the protagonist. It just, the ending did not blow me away. The next book I read is Obsidio by Jay Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. This is one of my 4-star ratings this month, and this was the third and final book in the Illuminae Files series, which I loved this series overall. Highly recommend. This one is actually my least favorite of the series, only because it was just so much all packed into this one book. Like every character that was introduced in the previous 2 books are now kind of all meeting up and working together in this book, and we're not only following all of those characters but introducing even more characters. So for some parts of it, it was very jarring to switch perspectives, and it was really confusing to kind of try to follow what everyone was doing, because it just takes place in this really small amount of time. So you're just trying to wrap your head around how everything is happening and how it's all happening at once, and it's very confusing, but still such a fun read, such a fun series. Highly recommend Illuminae if you haven't read it yet. Illuminae is still my favorite of the series just because it was so cool and unique. This is a series that's told, every book is told in like this unique format where it's told through files that are uncovered, while the protagonists are trying to kind of take down this corrupt corporation. So it's kind of cool. It's something very different. I've heard that audiobooks are also excellent. I read the physical book and really loved the experience of it, so I do recommend that. But if you like audiobooks, I've heard those are great too, so you can check those out as well. My next 4 out of 5-star book was God's Grave by Jay Kristoff. This was incredible, an incredible follow-up to the Nevernight series, Nevernight being the first book, this being the second. I loved God's Grave. It does have a slow build, so I would say, you know, kind of the first 100 to 150 pages are pretty slow. It takes a while to get there, but when you do, oh my gosh, does it pick up, and you just can't put it down. It's so good. It introduces a ton of new elements and makes this world even bigger than it already was in Nevernight. I loved this book. Loved the characters, loved the development of some of the characters that were introduced in Nevernight. Yeah, I don't want to say too much because I don't want to give anything away, but yeah, if you liked Nevernight, get on it. God's Grave is awesome, so highly recommend. The next book I have is a 4.5-star rating, and that is The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. I actually read this on my honeymoon and loved it. It is so much fun. It is the enemies to lovers trope, which if you love that in your books, highly recommend reading this. So much fun. It's about these 2 characters who are the maid of honor and the best man in their siblings' wedding. And at the wedding, every guest gets sick from a seafood buffet except for these two who didn't eat from the buffet, and they are offered to take this non-refundable honeymoon trip in place of the bride and groom. They hate each other, but they decide to do it anyway because who would miss out on a trip to Maui for free? So they take it, and as you can probably predict, things ensue. They start to like each other. It's so much fun to read about. So if you love that build-up, I highly recommend this one. The only reason it didn't get 5 stars for me is because I just wanted more build-up from it. It does kind of take a turn towards the second half of the book that I wasn't expecting, and isn't necessarily a bad turn. I just prefer more of the enemies to lovers build up and banter and all of that, and it was kind of cut short a little bit. So still highly recommend though. Such a fun read. All right, moving into my 5-star books for the month. The first one is Fix Her Up by Tessa Bailey. I loved this book. Okay, so this one follows a girl who is kind of like the town clown. Literally, she runs her own entertainment business for parties and dresses as a clown for kids' birthday parties, and she has a childhood crush on her brother's best friend, who was a Major League Baseball player and who unfortunately had to retire early because of an injury. So he actually comes back to his hometown, and our main character Georgie is determined to cheer him up, bring him back out of his slump that he's in after having his baseball career cut short. And he at first is having none of it, and as things progress, it just gets more and more fun to read about this awesome relationship. I loved it. It is a little bit more smutty than I expected. Don't let the cute cover fool you. This one's definitely R-rated, so if you like that in your romance books, I highly recommend. If you don't, maybe skip this one. It might not be for you. I have seen mixed reviews on this one, so I know that not everybody is going to love this. I know that some people may not like our main kind of love interest, Travis, in this book. I personally did. I loved the relationship. I loved the build-up and the banter between the two of them. In my mind, it was a perfect romance and just such a fun read that I couldn't put down. So highly recommend if you enjoy your romances a little bit more R-rated. The next 5-star book that I want to talk about is Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. I actually just finished this one today, and oh my goodness, it is so good. So I'm so happy I read this one. If you don't know what Warbreaker is about, it's about these two sisters, one of which is trained her whole life to go to a neighboring kingdom and marry this god king. And that is to kind of calm tensions between these two neighboring kingdoms as their kind of tensions are building towards a war that neither of them want, but kind of both feel is inevitable. So this older sister, her whole life is bred to kind of keep the peace by marrying this god king. The younger sister in this family is kind of free to roam around as she pleases because she doesn't have any real duties. She's kind of the unnecessary sister, and she loves her freedom. However, when it comes time to actually send the older daughter to the god king, the father changes his mind and ends up sending the younger sister, who has never been trained to handle that kind of climate, and is sent over to marry the god king instead. Just another classic Brandon Sanderson where the world building is unbelievable. The magic system is so unique. I'm so glad that I read this one because his female characters in this book, even though they are flawed, they're so great to root for. Like, they're so easy to root for because even with some of the incompetence that comes with them, you just love them. I love flawed characters because it's just more real, it's more relatable. So no Mary Sues in this book, thank goodness. Highly recommend Warbreaker. If you haven't read a Brandon Sanderson book, I actually would recommend starting with this one. I also recommend starting with Mistborn, so it's kind of up to you. This one is a standalone, so it might be a little bit more accessible to those of you who don't like starting huge fantasy series, because even though there are plans to have a sequel, right now this is a standalone and it works well as that. Some of you may really like that, and if you do, if you prefer standalones to big series, then maybe start Brandon Sanderson's works with Warbreaker, because it is so good. The last book that I want to talk about is the last 5-star read on my list, and that is Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. Oh my god, I love this book. This definitely makes my top 10 favorite books of all time. We follow this young girl who grows up in the swamplands in deep South Carolina. It basically follows this girl as she progresses through life. She is kind of forced to live by herself and become very independent at a very early age, and basically halfway through the book we get to this murder trial and this like murder mystery that just is so unique and takes this from a regular coming of age story to and elevates it to something so much more that I absolutely loved. So if something like a mix between a great coming of age story and a murder mystery sounds intriguing to you, highly recommend Where the Crawdads Sing. Written beautifully, amazing characters. The setting is so rich, so highly recommend. And that's all I've got for you today. Those were the books I read in the month of August. What were your favorites that you read in August? I would love to know, so leave some comments for me down below. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe. I release new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And until next time, bye!